I have Vinny Sorrentino from Lukasek Roofing, who's our main referral, my main referral. And what I use them for, in addition to your guys' work, which you've worked on my house,
Yep.
is so we have an insured, one of you guys calls in and says, hey, all my neighbors are getting roofs, and somebody told me I have damage. I don't love to just go immediately to an insurance carrier, so I'll usually call Vinny or his partner Wes, and they'll come out and they'll do a real inspection of your roof and really give you an idea of, is it really damaged? How damaged is it? Is it worth making an insurance claim? Right? Depends on the carrier. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go up on the roof with Vinny, and he's going to walk us through what he's going to look at when we send over a referral to them to do a roofing inspection.
Yep.
So do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I mean, whenever we meet with some of their customers, the first thing that we do is a total exterior inspection. So we'll walk the house from the ground level, just because there's things that we might notice right out the gate that'll show, hey, there was significant hail damage or a significant storm loss that happened at this residence. So we always start at the ground level. We walk the entire house. We take our time. We look at everything. And then, of course, we move it to the roof. So if you want, we can kind of start right now. So the first things that we'll do is we'll take a look at the residence from the outside. And my initial telltale whenever I'm evaluating a hail, wind, or storm damage is I immediately will start looking at some of the soft metals. So obviously this is going to be like your PVC, but that's not wrapped in fascia metal. But so like your garage doors, we'll look at your garage doors. Obviously, if there was big enough hail to cause damage to a garage door, that's going to kind of tell us what we might be able to expect when we get up on the roof. So from there, you know, after we assess it, lots of times we'll use chalk because that'll help really show where the dents might be. Sometimes on a white garage door, sometimes on different types of fascia metal, things aren't as easy to see. So then similarly, we look at downspouts, you know, and whenever we look at these types of things, it doesn't mean like if we find one dent on here that we think that warrants a claim to be made to your insurance company. It just means it's going to help tell a picture of what we might see up top. Also, something that's more important to consider is nowadays, a lot of policies are starting to have cosmetic exclusions. So even just a dent on this doesn't truly affect the ability of it to flow water away from the house. So that's not like an immediate, oh gosh, we got to file a claim. So then on a house like this that has brick veneer, obviously there's not a whole lot we're going to look at this ground level from here, but we will look at the vinyl siding. Something else to keep in mind, you know, vinyl siding, although over the years can become quite brittle, it's still pretty strong. So again, the things that I'm looking at, does it have any holes in it? Does it have any real penetrations in the siding that was caused by damage? As I'm walking the property, something that I'm keeping in mind the entire time is just a little dollar amount that I might associate with everything. So then whenever I talk to the customer, if I think it's more than their deductible or, you know, significantly higher, then we'll talk about it. That way I have an idea of where we're falling. I'll also look at the fascia metals and soffits. So your fascia metal is what goes over the garage, over the gable end of this house. And if you were to see significant dents, or maybe you saw some of it was torn off, obviously those types of things usually warrant a replacement because it's currently protecting some wood. And if that wood gets saturated and wet and rotted, then you can potentially start to run into the issue. Somehow water might make its way into the house. So then kind of the same thing, you know, we take a look at things at a glance here. You know, this homeowner has some of this vinyl, probably like PVC style staircases. We look at the entire exterior. I don't just look at the walls. I don't just look at the gutters. I don't just look at the roof. I look at everything in the eyes of insurance in the way Crawford-Butz would want us to. That way, when we do a real assessment, it's a fair assessment. I'm not just looking at things that are within my scope of work. I'm looking at things that might be other trades and things that we don't do, but ultimately looking out for the homeowner. But kind of the same thing here, right? I'll look at the deck. With this being a composite deck, composite decking can traditionally hold up to really big hail. This past year, on a lot of homes that we visited out in Arnold after the huge hail and tornado storm out there, I saw a lot of houses that were missing total elevations of siding, but the decks that were composite were totally fine. So, but so we're looking at these types of things. So if, let's just say this was a wood deck, lots of times if it's a cedar wood deck or just pine, it doesn't matter. Real hail, big hail, will either chip off some of the wood or it'll get what's called spatter. So it's, again, the same thing as far as just looking at the house, assessing everything that's kind of going on, and putting together a number in mind in my head, like, okay, we're definitely going to exceed the deductible.
Yeah.
Kind of similar thing here. If you look on the second story of the porch here, you know, there's some more vinyl siding. You know, I look at that in detail, make sure we're not seeing any holes anywhere. Same thing with the fascia boards. Although those fascia boards are actually made of wood, you know, again, it's similar to where if there's hail or wind or storm damage, you will be able to see it. So once I make my whole assessment on the entire exterior, you know, again, like this house, a lot of it's the same, right? We got the brick veneer, not going to have much damage there. Your downspouts, the fence, I'm sorry, the overhang porch area and the siding, everything within there. If everything looks good, or, you know, maybe it does have some damage, the entire time I'm taking pictures of it. And like I said, sometimes I'll throw chalk on it if that helps show the damage even further.
Yep.
We look at every detached structure on the property. And when we're on this, it's kind of the same thing. We just look for true damage. You know, this is a good example of whenever you'd get up on this roof, most insurance companies all have a standard of what they like to follow for what would be considered enough damage on a roof to warrant a full replacement.
And that's like hits per square,
It's
right?
hits per square. Yep. And we'll talk about that on top of this customer's roof, and I'll be able to show you exactly what we're talking about. So obviously the first thing I like to do is I like to get an overall walk or lay of what we're looking at. So this is a one-story ranch. And so since I know the way insurance typically looks at these types of losses, what they're going to be looking for is in a 10-foot by 10-foot area, is there enough hail penetrations and impacts on the shingle that have truly damaged the shingle to where it's compromised its ability to keep water long-term outside the home. Also, the other thing that I keep in mind is, let's say it's a newer roof. You know, the other thing I'm thinking about is the homeowner paid for a new roof. You guys are currently insuring a new roof. If the new roof has now been compromised due to the storm damage, we definitely just got to do some investigative work and make sure that it's really worth involving insurance. Because sometimes you can have hail on a new roof and it might leave some impacts, but at the end of the day, it's not going to do enough that I would consider damage or it would warrant a full replacement.
Sure.
So I would walk over, and a roof like this, typically, you know, if the insurance carrier, they're going to walk it with me, they're going to look at this front slope of the house, and then they're going to go through and they're going to try to identify anything that would look like a true impact of hail. Now, on this house specifically, they have gotten hail damage over the years, but it's never been anything that's too significant. But what I'm really looking for on hail damage is I'm looking for granular loss.
Okay.
So a significant amount of granulars that have been busted off due to a large, you know, to anywhere from small to large size hail that will now go through to the matting of the shingle. Because whenever you do that, there's really nothing protecting for the weathers and for the roof to age over time. What that does is it could eventually cause a hole, right? And if there's a hole there, that's going to be at risk for water to come in. So looking for those hail penetrations in a 10 by 10 area, you know, there's certain things. This is where it's important to have a good roofer that knows what they're looking at, because there's things that are called blisters or blemishes that'll be on a roof. And somebody that might be new to the industry that doesn't understand, that's not hail damage. And you definitely don't want to call it hail damage, because if you get a good adjuster out here, you know, they're gonna recognize that. And there's just certain things that aren't going to actually be damage, that it's just due to wear and tear, or maybe it's due to the roof not being properly ventilated. There's all kinds of these things that we have to consider when I'm walking the roof. But so as I'm in this area right here, you know, I'm not seeing anything that is, you know, a super big concern. You know, you got some areas where you've started to be able to tell, like right here, there's a little bit of granular loss. You can see just a little bit of discoloration, but it's nothing that I would be overly concerned about. So outside of looking at the front slope, other things I'm looking at while I'm up here is I look at the gutter lines. You know, again, we were talking earlier about some of the cosmetic exclusion policies that are out there. You know, previous to, there's been insurance companies that if there's one dent on this gutter line, it's going to warrant the full replacement. The reality is I believe the way the industry is kind of switching to is that doesn't truly affect the ability for the water to stay away from the house. If you got a dent in your gutter line, that's not very important. That's not going to be worth filing a claim. Now, let's say the gutter line is damaged so much that the pitch, and when I say the pitch, all your gutter lines have a proper pitch to where whenever water comes in from here, the pitch will go all the way down to this downspout and make sure that water is properly flowing away from the home. Like this year, I've seen some storms that the hail was big enough, it messed up the pitch of the gutter line, and water is now only staying on one side of the gutter line. Why is that a problem? That water can eventually back up into the back of the eaves of the gutter line and then into the customer's home. Okay. So we look at all those types of things. Additionally, if we go to the back slope of the house, one of the main things that we see over time is flashings and roof-to-wall flashings and chimney flashings and flashings like this that will tend to fail. And maybe it's due to the hail that busts it up. Maybe it's due to the weather, right? This is a consistent area where we will see problems of water coming in the house. So obviously we look at this for storm damage. If some of these nails were starting to pop up, if there was no longer a good seal, those would be things that would all be at risk for water to come inside the house. So we definitely evaluate the overall shape.
And like evidence of hail, you could see that on that.
Correct. So what we would do, this is kind of one of those scenarios. Obviously storms are typically directional. So, you know, if let's say if we knew the storm came from, you know, left to right, we would obviously be looking here for any type of hail or damage. Let me see if we got any on this side. So this kind of goes to show that that story that we're talking about that will end up telling the adjuster whether or not there was significant storm damage here.
Sure.
This is kind of leading the point. Like if I were to already naturally be thinking about this house, I'd say, sure, we're going to see some storm damage here. I'm going to show you in a minute. But I would say so far, I wouldn't think it'd be worth having insurance out here because you also don't want to affect your ability on keeping low rates, you know, and if you file claims nonstop, see, like there's not one dent on any of this stuff. And these soft metals is like the first telltale for consistent big hail.
Because what I'm trying with my own clients and with our agency's clients is when they call the insurance company, the conversation that they're having when they report that claim, we already know everything.
Yep.
All you're doing is starting the claims process, right? We already know.
And that's the most important thing. I think the issue that we see in this industry is you just got to do the right thing by the customer. You know, a good roof, there's plenty of good roofing companies out there.
Yeah.
They just need a fair assessment. They need a fair inspection and really steer the customer the right way. And that's where, you know, I think why we're having this conversation today is unfortunately there's so many people out there that are going to pop up on a roof and it's just a numbers game to them.
Yeah.
To us, it's long-term customer relationships is what we're interested in. Obviously, our relationship with you guys.
And ours is too.
Yep.
Correct.
And it's right. That's what we want. I want to steer somebody in the right direction.
So walk me through, you said like directional storms, right? So like that way is northwest.
Yep.
So this way is northwest, right? So spring storms, right?
Yep.
Moisture from the south, hits a cold front, bam, we get hammered, right?
Yep.
So are you, like, obviously you can tell there's some like...
So this is where I was going to go. Before we get there, I want to show you one thing, because this is what a blister looks like, right? So right here. So that is exactly what a blister will look like, all right? And it leaves a pretty good indentation, but that's not truly hail.
Okay.
That's just aging of the roof.
Okay.
And a good adjuster will recognize that and say, no, that's not hail damage. Okay. But to your right. So talking about directional storm. So we are on a 3-tab house, a 3-tab shingle roof, which have pretty low wind ratings.
Yeah.
And with that being said, so you're 100% right, Kevin. So this storm came this way, right? And this is where I would really start to evaluate some damage, right? So this is what's considered wind damage on a roof. Now, what's important to remember about this is wind damage, there has got to be a lot of it. And I mean a lot of it to really consider even calling insurance.
Okay.
Reason being is it is very easy to do just a partial shingle repair on this.
Sure.
As long as I am able to source a reasonable similar material that will fit in here and interlock correctly, I can fix this portion of the roof without doing the rest of the roof.
Do you feel like that's a conversation that you and Wes have with homeowners? Like, yeah, your roof has a little bit of damage, probably warrants a repair, not a replacement.
Absolutely.
And we'll bid that for you.
Absolutely. So if we get up here, and this is going to be a great roof for that exact conversation. As of right now, I would definitely not include insurance on this house. There's no reason to file a claim. But he's got some shingles that are missing that absolutely need to be replaced. Yeah. Otherwise, this customer is going to be at risk at getting some water in the house. Reason why some of that stuff is so important. Now, this specific area that we're over, again, me kind of thinking about the lay of this property, this is just that porch area. So somebody might think, oh, it's no big deal. You know, if some water spots get in, who cares?
Sure.
What people need to understand is most insurance companies, if not all of them, will never cover rotted plywood. Okay, rotted plywood, unless it's usually due to like some sort of code endorsement where the plywood is not currently up to code, most likely the water damage that's done to the wood decking, it's the first thing that's that's before the shingles and the synthetic go down. If it's rotted, it's not going to be covered. So it's very important to maintain your house now versus later, because the damage later could end up costing you a lot more money out of your pocket.
Yeah, the language in the policy would actually say sudden and incidental, but rotten wood is not sudden and incidental. Yeah.
And in all fairness, I talk to my customers about this all the time. It's a maintenance issue. You know, houses, some of these houses are built in 1950s, 1960s.
Sure.
Plywood's not meant to last forever.
Sure.
Some of the other things that we look at on the roof, and you're actually going to get to see a little bit of hail, is these are those soft metals. So this is what's called a 750 box vent. All right. And what this is doing is it's helping ventilate the roof. Now, when an adjuster comes up here, he's doing exactly what I'm doing. And this is where you can see that at some point this house did get some hail.
And that's those dark spots.
So these dark spots here, these are dense. Now, again, when you start talking about the overall ability for this ventilation to keep doing its job, it's going to be fine. It's still going to work just fine. It's not going to affect. So if you ever get a roofer that comes out and says, oh, yeah, I found a bunch of hail damage on all of your roofing components, and you know, they're dented up pretty good. Well, that's great, but that's not going to necessarily say that the rest of the roof needs to be replaced.
Like, this isn't the cost driver of a
no.
This
Absolutely
is an
not.
add-on when you're bidding a roof.
Absolutely
right?
not.
Like
yeah,
soft metal replacement.
Correct. Yep. So these roofing components are important to the house, but most importantly, what we're looking at is the overall shape of the shingle.
Yeah.
What kind of shape is the shingle in? Obviously, these pipe jacks, you know, there's nothing that really shows outside of here on the front side of it, but adjusters aren't really focusing too much on those. These only become important once the roof's being replaced. So we make sure that we put the proper components that were on the roof back on the roof.
Yep.
But after we kind of look at the front and back slope of the house, depending on the way the house has other additions to it per se, they might look at the left slope or the right slope. But at the end of the day, what they're ultimately going to do is they're going to create a test square. All right, and it's usually like a rough, you know, estimate. Some of them will end up using a tape measure, and they're going to do a 10-foot by 10-foot square, and within that square, like we were talking about earlier, they're going to try to find 10 good hail penetrations that would warrant possibly some damage to be fixed or replaced. So similar, they're going to make a little note here. This is the back slope of the house. They're going to have an H here for hail. They're going to have a W here for wind. And then they're going to start doing their job. And, you know, in this scenario, I mean, I personally don't really see much hail at all. I see some more blistering right here. That's what blistering looks like.
So when you're going to, either you and Wes or an adjuster, does an adjuster or you guys, like, so let's say non-directional storm didn't hit this, like, will you do your assessment based on where you think the most damage happened? Or
so that's a great question.
Are you just arbitrarily picking a 10 by 10?
That's a good question. Generally, if there's good enough hail or damage on a house that's going to warrant a replacement, there really should be hail all over.
Okay.
Right? If I have to go up on a roof and I have to pick a specific 10 by 10, that's really probably not a good claim to put in.
Okay.
True good damage will be visible on most of the elevations, most of the slopes of the house.
Okay.
But sometimes that can become relevant when you talk about directionally. If the storm comes this way, and let's say this house had a much higher pitch.
Sure.
Lots of times what we'll see is that there'll be significant damage on the right slope of the house, but on the left slope, there's none.
Yeah.
And so that's where we'll definitely talk the homeowner through, well, listen, you know, the insurance company's job is to put you at before the loss, right? And now you have damage on, let's say, the right slope of the house, but the left of the slope of the house is totally fine. So it's kind of walking them through what the outcomes could potentially be. Yeah. Because it's not the insurance's job, potentially, to replace the entire roof at that point. Yeah. So those are the things that we will talk and consider before we go through with the process of filing a claim. But back to, I was over here, you know, if I put myself in the shoes of an adjuster and I was looking at this roof, especially on the back slope, I would say there is zero hail damage. And although we are not on the same slope, but we can go over here. If we were to count some of the wind damage that's over here, you know, count 1, 2, 3, you know, four wind damage shingles that would need to be replaced. Some insurance companies would not include this in the back. They'd include this as the sides. But just for the sake of an easy argument today, we'll just say there's 4+ damaged shingles that was due to wind. Now, I do these test squares during my inspections because if I look at it in the eyes of insurance, I know I'm going to steer the customer in the right direction.
Yeah.
So with this being said, I would get off this roof at this point in time. I'd go talk to the customer and I'd say, hey, you know, unfortunately, there's nothing on here that I think would warrant including insurance.
Yeah.
But we do have some problems that we need to address right away, just to mitigate the issue. Because at the end of the day, you know, it's still about educating the customer on what their options are.
Sure. I'm always a little bit surprised. So we've had Wes do repairs on our roof, me and my wife's roof. A roof repair is really not that expensive, like in terms of home ownership.
Yeah,
like,
it just depends on what it is. You know, I mean, every situation is a little bit different, but a lot of it kind of comes down to being able to source the material.
Yeah.
These shingle suppliers and manufacturers over the years, they'll change, and that's something else that we will consider whenever we're looking at it. Is we know that certain shingle types are now discontinued. If they are discontinued, then we might talk about filing a claim, because this is a great example. Is over here, if they no longer produce this shingle or a similar shingle that'll work, I can't even patch this in. At that point, we would discuss this with Crawford-Butz.
Yeah.
And kind of, you know, talk the customer through it. But to answer your question, no, not all repairs are expensive. Some repairs can be fairly inexpensive. It also just kind of comes down to, you know, timing. A lot of the a lot of the good roofing companies right now, they're pretty backed up with full builds every day. That becomes the only downfall to it. But simple fixes are not overly expensive in our industry.
Right. So you would go down, you'd have a conversation with the homeowner and say, you've got some wind damage evidence, not worth making a claim.
Correct.
Here's an estimate. We could get to this. You're not.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely. So after we get down, I'd talk to the customer and say, hey, you know, you got some wind damage on the back slope of your house. You know, it's definitely something that we need to attain. You know, we need to fix something ASAP on it. We need to put some new shingles in. We can piece these shingles up. I will say, so this is a great question, because this homeowner is obviously currently having some issues with water coming in. So right here, and here, in there, you can see that there's been a form of sealant that's been put down to reseal those shingles.
Okay.
So to be honest, I would maybe start to have the discussion with this homeowner and say, you know, your roof's, is its life over with? No, but it's definitely moving in the back half of
start budgeting.
Its life,
like
right?
You might be.
So I'd say let's start looking at potentially, or some people, they might be ready to spend the money on a new roof because they want to upgrade the color or whatever it may be. So we would definitely talk them through everything I see, not just like, okay, no storm damage, just a few damaged shingles from wind. But we'd walk them through and see what they'd be interested in doing, because sometimes, and you can kind of tell if you look at this roof here, it's been patched in already in a couple different areas. I can see some discoloration in shingles that are from the new versus the old. So something else that we consider is sometimes it's like, when is patching too much, right?
Yeah.
If you consistently keep patching on a roof, you're just putting a Band-Aid on the real problem. And although it may not warrant an insurance claim, it's the homeowner's responsibility to keep up and maintain that house. It's time
to like start looking at.
Yep. So we would have all those discussions. Like on this roof specifically, I would say, hey, we got some wind damage. Definitely need to get some shingles put in here. But at the end of the day, I'd also be discussing that this roof is getting on the back half of its life. And it might be either worth budgeting, or if you're already ready, you know, we could put a new architectural shingle on.
Sure.
A big talking point in this day and age is impact resistant shingles.
Yeah.
Shingle
category 4 shingle.
Yep. Category 3 or category 4. These different classes of shingles, the technology has gotten better, and it might be worth, instead of waiting for an actual damage, you know, more consistent damage to happen up here, to just go ahead and replace this and get a good shingle up here. So, and you know, these different category shingles can actually, they can hold up. I think they can withstand up to right around 1.75 to 2 inch hail. It's all depends. It's Mother Nature. We can't control what it's going to do, but it's going to give you a much better chance at not having to worry about constantly replacing your roof.
Sure.
Here in the Midwest, we've been getting more hailstorms, more tornadoes than we ever have. I just saw something yesterday that they think the tornado alley is actually shifting a little bit towards our area of the Midwest. So now more than ever, it's important that whenever homeowners do have to assess this type of damage, they do have a good roofing company out. You need to have the discussions about long-term protecting your house from the weathers, right? Because it's also insurance companies, they're not maintenance plans, right?
Yeah,
it's not their job to give you a new roof. It's their job to keep you whole, right? So in this scenario, in some of these scenarios, I think it's important for the homeowner to understand if their roof's getting on the back half of their life, they should really consider possibly getting a full roof replacement and seeing what other options they might have.
So just from a consumer standpoint, I guess I have two questions, right? So let's say we have an insured, obvious damage, going to get the roof replaced, right? Insurance is going to make them whole. And let's say they wanted to voluntarily upgrade to a category 4 shingle.
Absolutely.
Like, what is obviously the insurance company's not going to pay for that, right? Because it's a replacement and it's not what they had before.
Correct.
Is that cost prohibitive for people, or is that like just a good dollar spent? Like,
so it's a great question. This roof is a fantastic example. It's a 3-tab roof. 3-tab roofs have horrible wind ratings, like I said earlier.
Yep.
The newer shingles, in terms of a roof like this, okay, I would say it'd probably be in the ballpark of $1,000 to $1,500 additional out of pocket to put on a much better shingle.
Okay.
So in my opinion, I think absolutely it's cost prohibitive. Do we have that backwards?
Non-cost prohibitive.
No,
it's all right. Yeah,
that is
it's a good investment. It's $1,500 or whatever.
Yeah, so it's a fantastic investment on the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, again, we talk about the consistency of storms.
Yeah.
You know, every year as a roofing company, you kind of wonder, oh, what are the storms going to be like? And people would always used to get worried. The Midwest has been getting worse. It's worth every penny to upgrade things on, especially the exterior of your house, to help keep the weather out. And a roof, in my opinion, is the most important. For us, the way we make that calculation is it's all going to be based upon the amount of squares that are existing on the house. So like this roof right here, you know, although it's not a big home, this has still got a lot of surface area. This probably falls in the neighborhood of 25 to 28 total 10 by 10 areas, right? And so depending on what that is, that's where we make our calculation on what the additional upgrades would be. I also know that not all of them, but a lot of insurance companies are starting to recognize class 3 and class 4 impact resistant shingles and are starting to offer some discounts. I know, you know, the industry's heading that way, but it's good for the house no matter what.
And then the other question I have is, so let's say you guys come out, you do an assessment, not worth making an insurance claim, but we're at the conversation of time to start budgeting for that new roof in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. Is there a time of year that's most advantageous for a homeowner to call like a trusted roofer, right? Like, is late fall a good time? Like, obviously April 15th is a bad time.
Sure, it can be. So it kind of goes both ways, right? So you really technically, I can't replace a roof when it's too cold outside. Main thing's because you want the roof to get hot and you want the seals to everything to seal properly on a roof. And there's a certain temperature that we needed to be at to comfortably install a roof. So, I mean, as much as if you want to sit down and you want to talk in the fall about it with the intention maybe replacing the spring, that's totally fine. But in my opinion, if it's a good roofing company, I've got time for you 365 days a year. The price isn't going to change depending on based upon the time of the year. The only thing that can kind of dictate price is just like anything in the world, the different distributors can take price increases on certain products. And that's something that's totally out of our hands. But as far as a timing, you can call us any time of the year. You know, we've got a good team on our hands that are willing to take time out of their day, no matter what day it is, Monday through Sunday, to discuss these types of things and help customers prepare for, you know, certain situations long term.
All right, sounds great, man. All right, thank you so much, Vinny.
You're welcome.